So, before we begin this particular episode of MilgeekAchoo, let's just backtrack a bit and have a look at where we left off on the railway station model and discuss what's happened since we finished the actual construction part of the project. Since the end of building the railway station model and priming it ready for painting, I had a wee bit of an unfortunate mishap. Actually, it was rather a disastrous one, in which, while undergoing a file backup and transfer of the video I'd shot of the painting stage of this job, all of the files were either corrupted or lost. Thank you so much, Windows. I don't really feel like going into the technicalities of why this happened, but after a period of mourning, I simply had to chalk this up regrettably as a bit of a dead project and stoically move on. I was very disappointed about this because I was particularly proud of the job I'd done with this model, as it was my first really big modelling project that I'd undertaken since my disability. I was surprised and really pleased about how I'd actually managed to cope with making this model and that I'd made a fairly okay job of it in the end. Anyway, as it turns out, I actually discovered quite by chance over time that I had some random files relating to this project saved elsewhere. Bits and pieces that I'd shot for social media uploads. And on top of that, due to the fact that I transfer my work using external hard drives and USB sticks, I don't trust the cloud for video stuff, I kept coming across scraps of footage relating to this project scattered around. So, long story short, I've kind of reconstructed an edit of the original paint job that I'd done with this model, and this video is a result of that work. Now, I have to warn you, this version is not 100% complete. There was stuff that I'd just completely lost, and some stuff that I'd found that was from the original corrupted files, but I was able to rescue. But one way or another, I've actually been able to reassemble this particular video project. So bear with me, as there are some very ropey or glitchy sequences here, and some stuff that might be slightly out of focus or badly framed that I wasn't originally going to use. But I'm using it now because I simply feel that I really want to complete this particular project, and it's better to do so with what I have than never complete it at all. So I hope you enjoy this. And so, as they say, on with the show. Starting with the roof, which as you can see is in its grey primed coat, I decided to try something a little bit different and experiment with semi-opaque washes. I used the grey base layer to provide variations in tones to give an aged or weathered beaten look. As well as trying out a new technique, for me anyway, I'm also giving craft paints a go instead of the usual specialist modeller's paints. I've experimented with these cheaper paints in the past, and I find it's really hard to see such a marked difference in quality as to justify the noticeable difference in price between the cheap paints and more expensive specialist modeller brands. I guess though, the one thing I would say is that modeller's paints generally seem to be more opaque in their coverage, but in this case where I want translucency, it's not an issue. Now, as for the walls, and again here I'm using craft paints, I was using a dry brushing technique, so again I didn't need flat coverage. Dry brushing really has been the saviour for my painting with this model. Because of my problems with my right hand, I really feared conventional brush painting. But I have circumvented more exacting painting techniques by using a combination of dry brushing and washes in layers. While not exacting its coverage of sections of this model, this shotgun method, as I'd like to call it, was still a lot easier for my dodgy hand to achieve, and I didn't have to worry so much about making mistakes and painting outside the lines accidentally, as I would conclude each section of painting with a little precision tidying up, which even I could manage. Obviously it's not the clean and precise method that can be achieved by going in with a good modelling brush. But when you consider that my model will be eventually viewed from a distance, this final less fussy effect will be acceptable. Just don't look at it too closely. What I'm doing is making use of thin washes to add depth of detail and stain to pristine coats to give them an aged look. And this is how I continued, with dry brushing followed by washes followed by softer dry brushing, so building up the tones from the darkest shades to the highlighting. Occasionally, I did make a faux pas, as when I used too stiff a brush for some of the highlighting. But one of the advantages of this layered method was that I was able to rectify this by then dry brushing over this layer with a softer, more appropriate brush. In this case, I discovered the advantages of using a cosmetic brush for their inherent softness of bristles and fluffiness. A bit of a bad habit that I've actually got into is testing my dry brushing on the back of my hand before applying it to the model itself. I've since found out that you can get a specialist tool or make a specialist tool called a dry brushing palette to do this testing. It's a little bit cleaner than ending up looking like a bit of an Oompa Loompa. As a side note, and as it happens, this discovery led me to buying myself a set of specialist dry brushes, as this seems like it would be my go-to approach to painting from now on. With the main building colours blocked out using this layered method, I then did some more tidying up and began to add some of the unavoidable finer detailing. For this, I did have to switch to a normal paintbrush, but used a less exacting and almost impressionistic approach, kind of daubing in small areas of paint to give a sense of the variations of colour. No more fine line painting for me, I'm afraid. Now, I tried to be a bit clever when I did have to apply flat coats, as here with the alcove wall panels of the station. I was lucky in that the timbering framework actually aided me in creating a neatly painted panel effect, and I didn't have many wobbly hand mishaps. So this worked out fine, but it gave the overall look of the building the impression of having some more delicately applied painted areas. It's just all painting cheats, really. Now, I have to admit there's been a few stopping and starting and cutting off the video here to make up for the little mishaps I have with my hand. But one thing I'd say is that the kind of sloppiness that I've ended up producing with my painting here kind of fits in with the overall deteriorated look of the old building that I'm trying to achieve. At least that's what I'll tell people, that it was on purpose. I was getting there now, so it was a case of giving the model a once over to check out any refinements I could add using smaller brushes where I could. Things like the roof's chimney, for example, where I tried to be very careful, taking my time so I didn't get paint where it shouldn't be. Once again, as you can see, I'm not being too fussy here. As far as I'm concerned, the little mistakes that I made, the little run over of paint and things like that, is just adding to the character of the building. I am, after all, looking for that peeled paint effect of a weather-beaten building. Additionally, I hit the edges of some of the detailing with a very soft dry brushing highlight with the smallest amount of paint on the brush, so that when it was applied, it was so faint as to be only just noticeable. But the highlighting does make a difference, especially on those sharp edges. In the end, I was rather pleased with the results. Yes, it was a softer and less detailed painting job than I used to be able to do before my disability, but the overall effect at the intended distance was quite acceptable, and all done without too much stressing over having to rectify fine and precise brushwork, and also no major accidents at this point either. Having decorated the station house, I then moved on to installing the windows. I just cut some small rectangles of transparent plastic that I'd rescued from some food packaging. Here I used modelling canopy glue to stick the panes in place. The advantage of using a canopy glue being that it dries completely transparent, so I don't have to worry so much about accidentally smearing glue where it shouldn't be using my cocktail stick applicator. On top of this, or rather behind this, I wanted to put some material to simulate curtains or blinds. Due to the fact that there's no interior detail in this building, I kinda wanted to disguise this fact a bit by obscuring the view through the windows. For this, I simply cut some strips of appropriately coloured tissue paper and then glued them in onto the back of the glass that I've just fitted. I tried to vary the sizes of the paper to give the impression of various states of opened and closed blinds. I should note at this point, thinking to the future, the reason the building is an empty hollow shell is because I want to fit some interior LED lighting eventually. So the thin tissue paper should add a nice soft effect once lit up, but this will be a ways off yet, probably when I eventually have a permanently fixed layout to fit the model to. Now, at this point I start to assemble the station by adding the already completed platform. The big surprise here was that everything actually fitted together nicely, so my measuring was done accurately enough, and the provision for joining the two sections also worked okay. So, on the home stretch now, and just as I was thinking how well I'd been doing and how smoothly everything seems to be coming together, I hit a bit of a problem. It's typical how you get all the way to the end of a project and the last thing you do seems to be the problematic stage. I'll explain with this next clip, which comes from one of my earlier Workbench Journal videos. Well, not everything works the first time you do it. I was just about to say that I'd completed my very first Engage building project. Well, at least I thought I had until this morning. Now last night I finished this off. The last little bit of this project I had to do was to finish off the fence, which I'd added to the platform. The main thing that's kept me occupied over the past few days is me adding this platform section to the main railway station building. Now, long story short, this fence turned out to be an absolute nightmare, essentially because I wanted it to match visually the fences on the ATTRIBITIONS Engage platforms models that you can buy, because of course if I add a ATTRIBITIONS platform to this, I want them to sort of look similar stylistically. So it took me ages to find this particular style of fence, which turned out to be a Pico product. It wasn't exactly right in size and style, so I did end up having to do a little bit of fiddly cutting up and building to get this to fit on the station, which was a bit frustrating, but I got there in the end, and I thought, if I hold that at a distance, you can see that didn't look too bad. I thought. I wasn't really happy with it, to be fair. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but I was willing to let it go because it didn't look too bad, as you can see, and this is Engage, so it'll be intended to be viewed from a distance. Well, a bit of a nightmare. I thought I'd finish it off last night by just giving it a quick spray of lacquer, because I lacquered the rest of this model because it's intended to be handled a lot as I pick up and place it in different locations on my temporary layouts, so it really needed a bit of lacquer to help protect it. So I thought I'd finish this fence off by adding a bit of lacquer. Turned out to be a bad idea. Woke up this morning, came downstairs. I'll just take this off here like this. I don't know if you can see it. Like I say, it looks fine from a distance, but if I bring this up close and turn it this way, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can. I think even with this camera you can. See how it's gone wavy. Now this seems to be something to do with the flexibility of the Pico fencing, which was intended to be quite pliable so that you could do your fencing round corners and things like that. You could bend it. So it was made of a very, very soft plastic. Now unfortunately there's been some sort of reaction between that soft plastic, even though it had been painted, and the lacquer that I've put on, and that's resulted in this. Yeah, you can see it there, I think, even in the camera. See how it's disfigured or bowed this fencing now, and I can't live with that. It's one of those things where you may think at a distance, oh, nobody will notice that, but this is a modeler thing, that the I know it's there problem, and I do know it's there, and I just can't live with it. So long story short, probably a bit too late, but long story short, I'm going to have to remove that to be satisfied with this and to finish it off properly. And I was so happy with the station, the job I've done of the station, seeing as this is my first attempt at an Engage model. I thought, no, I can't finish it off with a bit of a crap fence there. That's the first thing I noticed. Never mind the rest of it. That's what I would notice every time I looked at it. So it's going to have to come off. But then that leaves me with the problem is, what I'm going to replace it by, because I know for a fact that this was so hard to find in the first place, this Pico fencing. There's nothing else out there that resembles the Kato platform fencing stylistically, so that's a no-go. I'm not going to find anything in the shops, so that leaves me with scratch building myself. Probably what I was thinking was I'd end up using something like these styrene strips and scratch building the fencing. Now you can imagine how laborious that's going to be, so I wasn't keen on that. Then just suddenly this morning, I was just having a cup of tea and I thought, do you know, I wonder, could I 3D print this fence? Now, the reason this didn't strike me the very first time I made a fence is because, as you can see, it's so thin and flimsy. I thought, this will never come out on my printer, not in a million years. But this morning I thought, well, what the hell have I got to lose? You know, I can still go back to scratch building, but let's try that first. So that's what I did, and would you believe it? There we go. This came off my printer this morning. I've only got an FDM printer, it's not a resin printer I've got, but even so, that ain't bad. And the one thing I do like about this is look how it's flexible, but a lot more sturdy than the Pico fencing. And the good thing about this, because I designed myself, and I'll put a picture of the design I did in a piece of software called Tinkercad, is I can do whatever length I want. I can vary the poles or whatever, call them in these fences to make different styles of fences, or fences of different lengths and heights and all this sort of thing. And I can also print out as much of this damn stuff to whatever dimension I want, as I like, you know. So I've got never-ending fencing now. But this is great, and if I hold this up here like that, you can see it matches the style that I'm going after brilliantly. I'll be able to do this kind of slanted fence very easily in 3D, and this was a bit of a pain cutting this out of the Pico. So problem solved, and there you go. Who'd have thought that I'd be able to print something this thin out on my printer, and it only took 9 minutes to actually print. I didn't print it at a particularly high resolution, as you can probably tell, but with a bit of cleaning up, this would be perfectly adequate. So there we go. Silver lining, I think that's what they'd call this, out of a bit of a bad situation. And so there you go. Despite the hiccup at the end, which is typical for me, everything, as I say, did go quite well, unexpectedly so. In fact, I know I make a big deal about this disability I have, well, slight disability, it's all relative, slight disability I have now with my hand, but it's kind of got to me in a way. In the beginning, I thought that was it. Modelling was finished for me. So this is all part of a long rehabilitation process, and I must thank the local NHS community stroke team for encouraging me, in fact, to get back into a hobby as part of my stroke rehabilitation. That has to be said, because you tend to get down in the dumps about these things, and being a bloke, you kind of throw your toys at the pram and say, that's it, you know. But it wasn't, and I slowly came back. I've done test model after test model, culminating in this particular railway station model. The model railwaying is my kind of new hobby. I can't do the intensive and precise competition level scale modelling that I used to try and do. My hand just will not allow me to do that. But this has really proved to me that, to be honest, it is just a kick up the arse to tell me to stop feeling sorry myself. There's people a lot worse than I am. Mine was a series of minor strokes. So this has really got me back in the saddle, and it just goes to show how good the modelling hobby is for your health, as much as anything, your mental health. So this is a big plug for hobbies, really, and guys' mental health. This is why guys really should get into having a hobby. It doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't have to be modelling, whatever, but just something that really gives you a bit of drive to do things, to get up out of bed, get out your pyjamas in the morning, and yes, that was an issue at one point. Get out the depression and get on and just start producing something that gives your health a boost and gives you enjoyment. And at the same time, because you're watching this, if you've stayed to the end, Sorry it's so long again. Gives other people joy as well, and maybe a bit of an idea of what they can do. So that's the railway station. That was my first N-gauge model. It's obviously going to be part of a series of models now, but obviously these are going to be slow in coming because although I've sort of overcome some issues, as I keep repeating, I do have to stop and start these videos quite a lot because of the problems I have, which is why they take so long to make and why they're so slow in coming. But I've already got onto my next model, which is a little gas station for my railway layout. And I've already got plans for future models. You'll just have to bear with me, really. These won't be out, not even weekly, never mind daily. These will be kind of like monthly things. But I'd like to thank you very much for being very, very patient, put up with my rambling, and just spending time with me and looking at this little model. Leave me some comments, tell me what you think about this. I think I'm going in the right direction. But thanks very much for watching.